Sorry. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I hope that you came from our previous session, so it's nice to see you again. Quick introduction for anybody who's joining us for the first time. My name is May, and I'll be your host for this session. And just before we get started, I have some house rules for you, just to ensure that this session will go through smoothly, right? So keep an eye on the chat box just to make sure not to flood it with spam, and you can catch important announcements and links on how you can engage with us via Slido. You can also see the chat box for the code and to ensure that you're writing the right code and inserting the questions in the right place. And if you can, have your mobile phones ready so you can scan the QR codes on the slides and see career opportunities that are available in all Nestlé markets around the globe. Right, before we get started, I would love to introduce our speaker for this session, and his name is Adam Simon. He's the Head of Innovation and Disruption Strategy at IPG Media Lab. As an Executive Director of Strategy at IPG Media Lab, Adam has been developing innovation strategies for the past 15 years, and he also produced one of Unilever's first branded podcasts back in 2005. I'm excited to learn from Adam and then about Nestlé's partnership with IPG Media next program. And with that, Adam, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, May. I will share my screen and just dive in. Thank you, May, and hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As May said, my name is Adam Simon, and I lead the IPG Media Lab. The lab is IPG's Global Innovation Center of Excellence. We are based in New York City, which is where I am speaking to you from today, but we work with a network of around 150 folks globally to help brands like Nestlé really activate and innovate in the media and marketing landscape. And I'll talk to you in a second about what all of that means. But today I'm going to give you sort of a brief overview of how we think about innovation at the lab, a tool that we use called Futurecaster, which is really key to how we integrate with big global brands like Nestlé to help make sure that we're meeting our customer in the new channels and on the new platforms that they're using every single day. So with that, and obviously feel free to drop some questions in the chat, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end, because normally I like to do these a little more conversational, but I know we have a big group here today. So I'll go through my slides and we'll have a little bit of time to talk through Q&A at the end of the session. So when we say innovation, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think if you stopped two people on the street and asked them what innovation means, you would get very different answers. And that is certainly true when we're working with brands as well. So one of the first things I had to do when taking over the lab is really come up with a definition for what we mean by innovation. And this is sort of the evolution of that. I like to think about it as an on-ramp for innovation. When you are starting to think about innovation and engaging as a brand or as on the marketing side of things, the first place to start is really what we call strategic insights. And this is really the understanding and education of what is happening at the consumer level, at the brand level, at the channel and platform level. And we have a variety of tools that we use to sort of keep track of what is happening from a trend perspective and make sure that the brands we work with are always moving to and meeting customers where they are headed, not where they are today, not where they were yesterday, but where they're going to tomorrow and in the future. Once you go a little bit further up the ramp, that's what media plan innovation. That's mostly what we mean when we say innovation coming from a media agency. This media plan innovation really looks like getting new partners and new channels onto the media plans. So I know we have a variety of folks with a variety of backgrounds. If you're unfamiliar, the media plan is basically the plan for where we purchase and place media across every kind of channel. So that includes traditional channels like television and print, and also newer platforms like social and search. And innovation, one of the main functions of innovation in media and marketing is understanding what new emerging technologies and channels are opening up new behaviors for consumers, and what the brand opportunities in those channels are. So that center part of this on-ramp to innovation is really about testing in market and making sure that we're making smart decisions as to which platforms and services and emerging channels we're investing in. And then lastly, all the way at the top end of that on-ramp is business model innovation. Because the interesting thing about innovation in the media space is it's a great place to start to learn and understand these new platforms as consumers start to adopt them as early adopters and then eventually late adopters. And eventually, the entire population starts to shift to these platforms. It really helps us test and learn very early to understand how people are using them, how we can engage with our customers on these platforms. But eventually, sometimes that actually starts to change not just how we communicate with our consumers, which is sort of at the highest level, what we think of as media and marketing, but also how we reach them with our products and services. And that can cause changes to business models. And I think a great example of that right now that we're seeing in the marketplace is what's happening with social commerce. As all of the major social platforms start to turn on commerce and shopping capabilities, that is changing how we engage with our consumers on those platforms on the media and marketing side, but also it might start to impact things like distribution for our products and how we're going to actually sell those products to consumers, not the entire go-to-market strategy, not just the marketing strategy. So at the very highest level, that is sort of where things can go with innovation. So I'm going to take you through sort of how we think about productizing these and the different products and tactics that we have within each of these categories. So first one, of course, is strategic insights. We always want to start with that education and that really solid baseline knowledge to make sure that we're all on the same page. A lot of innovation and a lot of the platforms and emerging technologies that we talk with our clients about, they tend to get a ton of press. Like, for example, at least here in the US, for the past year or so, there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse and Web3 and crypto, and all of those things get a ton of press. And they are important. They are super important for us to keep track of. But there is a dramatically different size of user base for something like a metaverse platform like Roblox or Fortnite versus the number of people who are actually holding crypto wallets today. If you look at the press, you might think that those are two sort of relatively on par, areas for exploration, crypto and metaverse gaming platforms. There's dramatically different, more people inside those metaverse gaming platforms than there are the number of people who hold crypto wallets globally. So that's the kind of thing that we like to sort of unearth for our clients and make sure that we're all on the same page and not buying into the media hype around some of these things. So there's a few tools and a few sort of publications that we produce every year to sort of help educate both ourselves as well as our clients, as well as folks around the globe, including some folks like you. The first one is our annual outlook, and this is really looking at changes in consumer behavior. So this is looking at a macro level, we produce them both for the regions, for the US and APAC and Europe, as well and Latin America, as well as sort of a global perspective. And it's really looking at early adopter consumer trends. Where are we seeing those most innovative consumers, those early adopters, start to change their behavior? Where are they going? What are they doing? And specifically, what are they doing that we think is going to scale into being a mainstream consumer behavior 3 to 5 years down the road? So once we dive into that, we can sort of then start to use that to inform our media and marketing strategies and how we're reaching them. And again, it's all about testing and learning, because a lot of the point of investing in innovation is to make sure that we're experimenting and learning now with things that are going to be mainstream behaviors down the road. So our outlook for 2022 was called Embracing Entropy. And the main thesis there was really around the fact that as we start to shift out of the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of continued experimentation with what the next version of everything is. And that includes everything from how we work, because of course, here we are on a Zoom call still, even 2 years plus after the pandemic started. How we work has changed a lot, and it's going to the answer for the future future of work, for example, is going to be, yes, we're going to continue doing a lot of virtual meetings and virtual webinars, but also a return to in-person. And so we're going to have to figure out what that sort of hybrid version looks like. And then there's the interesting pressure coming from the absolute earliest adopters who are really talking about work in the metaverse and using more immersive 3D virtual platforms for meetings like this, rather than sort of the 2D version for things like Zoom. So that's a high level look at our outlook. You can go to ipglab.com and we'll share some of those links in the chat, but ipglab.com will link you to a full written version of our outlook, which is public. So any of you feel kind of free to read through the entire report. Beyond the outlook, we do a bunch of other work. We go to the consumer, in terms of strategic intelligence, we go to the Consumer Electronics Show every year, which is one of the largest trade shows in the world. And it happens in Las Vegas in the US every year. And this is a great place to sort of see new and emerging technology on the ground, get some hands-on time with it in an exciting venue. We produce an innovation annual every year. So if the Outlook is really looking at consumer behaviors, the Innovation Annual is focused on this channel, a look at the channels. So I'll talk you through what that means in a moment, because that is sort of the key to integrating with our Futurecaster tool. We also produce category disruption reports, which are looking at the, again, more that sort of business model level of the on-ramp for innovation. And that is looking at how the business fundamentals of different categories are changing. So for example, for Nestlé, we might be looking at what's happening in at-home consumption of food and beverage. And that is how we would look at our category disruption reports. Every week, my team publishes analysis of what's happening in the media and marketing innovation space that's distributed in a newsletter, as well as our blog, which you can get to from ipglab.com. And we also produce a podcast for those who prefer to listen instead of read. And that is something that comes out about every 2 weeks. And you can subscribe to that at the link on your screen. So those bottom two are both totally publicly available. So if you're interested in what I'm saying and sort of the methodology that I'll take you through in a moment, that's a great place to hop on and subscribe and follow the work that my team is doing. So media plan innovation is that second level of the on-ramp for innovation. And this is mostly how we're working with Nestlé at this point. We are working with Nestlé as their global innovation agency and helping to organize all of the individual markets. There are dozens and dozens of markets, obviously, that Nestlé sells their products in and markets their products in. And we're really coming in to help make sure that there is a rational plan for who is investing in what in which markets. And we want to make sure that the markets are all communicating and they're all learning from each other, so that if somebody is experimenting in one space, that everybody has understanding of how that experiment went, how that test and learn went, and is able to learn from that, from other folks' work. And obviously there are differences between the markets. There are cultural differences, of course. So something that does resonate in one market, that doesn't necessarily mean it will resonate in another. There might be cultural differences. There are differences in the platforms that people use, that consumers are using. So there are differences in also then the capabilities and how we can activate on those platforms. And then, of course, there are budgetary differences. I'm talking to you from New York, here in the US. The US market tends to have a much higher budget than a lot of other markets because of the size of the market. That's obviously true for China as well. So there are always, very different strategies and capabilities if you're looking at activating in the US or China, say, versus a smaller country that's going to have a more limited budget. So we have to take all of that into consideration when we're crafting the sort of overarching global strategy. It sounds easy. It sounds we're going to sell Nestlé products globally. It sounds like something that you might you can sit down and hammer out the whole process in in a week or so. But when you get down to all of those details, in order to do it really smartly, it takes a lot of work and a lot of collaboration across all of those markets, both internally at Nestlé, as well as with us and our agency partners who are actually doing the media purchasing and buying and activating globally. So the way that my team integrates into all of this, well, one is, and this is something that has been true since the beginning of the IPG Media Lab over 15 years ago, we've always had a core team of partnerships folks who work to scour the landscape and find not just the big partners. Obviously, we work with the innovation teams at the biggest tech companies like Meta and Google. But also a core part of our offering is that we also meet with startups around the world. So our partnerships team meets with about 300 to 400 startups every year. And what they're looking for is looking for startups with interesting technology that can activate in these innovation territories that we've identified for clients. And then really assessing, are they ready to work with a big brand like Nestlé? Because there are plenty of folks out there who have super interesting technology. It might be great for a smaller brand. It might be something that, a direct-to-consumer startup that is riding high on VC money might be excited to experiment with. But with a brand like Nestlé that is activating in dozens of markets around the world and spending a significant budget, the risk tolerance is a little different and the requirements are a little different. It's not just about a larger company being more conservative. It's also about the fact that at a company like Nestlé, you're going to need to really be able to follow up with reporting. You need to understand what the return on investment is going to be. You need to have very clear KPIs and the ability to measure inside of the platform. And there are a lot of exciting startups and a lot of exciting technologies where not all of that is possible yet. You might be able to do something cool and that might be worth it, but we have to factor in the larger picture and to make sure that we're not just doing something cool just for the sake of doing something cool, that there's going to be some return on investment. And that doesn't have to necessarily be direct sales, of course. It doesn't necessarily have to be about impacting sales in a very sort of straightforward way. It can be about brand lift and brand awareness. It can be about positioning Nestlé or Nestlé brands as being more innovative. So sometimes the value of innovation is PR, is getting stories written about you. So all of those are on the table. It's just being very clear and very specific about what the goal is for any individual activation and working with any individual partner or emerging platform. So to help sort of organize that and think through how to prioritize those things, several years ago, around the time that I first joined the lab 7 years ago, we came up with this this framework that we call the 99-1. And this is really a way of ranking emerging technologies and emerging media channels along two different axes. On the x-axis, we're ranking their reach, which is pretty straightforward. This is how many people are using this technology, how many people can you reach with this technology or with this emerging channel. But then that vertical axis, that's the maturity. And that's really looking at things like measurement. Are there established KPIs? Are there established best practices? Can we measure it and understand how consumers are engaging with it? And are there even turnkey opportunities for brands at all? A lot of early emerging channels, there isn't necessarily a straightforward way for brands to activate. So sometimes your best way into a new platform is really working with influencers, which is totally a logical strategy depending on the platform. But that's going to have a little bit of a different, it's a little bit less mature, right? If the only way in is really to work with the folks who have already built up an audience on the platform. So we track about 25 or 30 different territories. This changes a little bit every year, and we shift the reach and maturity levels based on what we're seeing in the market. And this really helped us sort of think through, and talk with brands. Are you really focused on that 90%, which is really focused on optimization? Those are the kinds of things like podcasting and gaming that we think pretty much every brand with any amount of interest in innovation should be investing in. Or are you willing to get more experimental? Then we'll move you down to the 9, things like augmented reality and conversational interfaces. Things like, voice assistants, those are sort of in that 9% where they're still definitely emerging. There still is a lot of experimentation happening, but you can get a little bit of a better sense as to measurement and things like that. And then all the way on the 1%, those are things that for most brands, it's very early days. And a lot of what we're doing there is first to market. And the question is, are you willing to be first to market? Are you willing to be sort of the first major brand or one of the first major brands activating in this space? I mean, that's where a lot of the KPIs for a lot of that 1% activation, because there are not really a lot of measurement or KPIs. That is where a lot of the KPI, the sort of what we're looking for is PR and attention on the brand for being early to the space. So we had been using this methodology for a couple of years, and then we realized we needed a little bit more rigor on top of this to help us really convince a lot of our brands and clients that innovation, to invest in innovation, to help them narrow the field, because even this is a lot of a pretty broad swath of things to considering when thinking about innovation. So probably about 4 years ago, we built a tool called Futurecaster. And Futurecaster is our proprietary audience tool that identifies exactly how the audiences that a specific brand are looking to engage with are using emerging media and technology channels. So this allows us to say, for example, if we are working with the Nespresso team in a specific market, and we work to identify exactly what their target audience looks like, we can connect that audience to those 25 territories and filter them down to just the ones that they are most likely to be using and engaging with. So here's a sort of overview as to how this fits into some of those other tools I was describing to you. We start with those Outlook macro consumer level trends. From there, we filter that down into those 99.1 innovation territories, and then Futurecaster helps us filter that down even further into a relatively small number of territories that we can consider for a specific brand or even for a specific activation, because we know that obviously certain activations and media plans might be targeting different audiences. So the reason to use Futurecaster and the reason that we introduced it is to work with brands like Nestlé at a global level who have a lot of complexity in terms of the different consumers they're trying to reach, and to really help filter that down. It really also helps focus everyone's attention on the specific things that we think are going to be, based on our Futurecaster research, are going to be the most impactful for a specific brand and a specific media plan. I'm going to talk you through 2 case studies, and our work with Nestlé is a little bit still in the early days. So unfortunately, I don't have a Nestlé specific case study that I can share with you, but I want to show you sort of how Futurecaster works in action. So these are 2 case studies from real activations that my team put together for a couple of our other clients, and that actually went into market. So one main reason that we use Futurecaster is to introduce those new channels and partners to our brands. We had this was about a partnership between H&M and DraftKings, which is a sports betting platform here in the US. So H&M gave us a brief around raising awareness for their men's collection, so specifically male audience. When we ran that, obviously the audience is more detailed than that, but when we ran that audience through Futurecaster, it identified these 3 emerging technology and media channels as the priorities for them: gaming, connected communities, and culture pops. Those were our key territories. The combination of those, this is an interesting one because looking across those, sort of the combination led us to really start thinking about sports betting. Sports betting is a new category in media, at least here in the US. And it's one that obviously, for some obvious reasons, some brands have brand safety concerns around. So we thought that we had a great idea and a great partner for them, but we really had to do some convincing to convince H&M that this was the right place for them to activate. So the idea that what we eventually came up with was a custom multi-sport prediction pool series, which was tied to some of the biggest events in professional sports, things like the NBA playoffs, Champions League finals, and Europa League finals. And the pools allowed users to predict outcomes from the relevant game, score points based on how many correct predictions they made. And then the users with the most correct predictions would win a cash prize. So a little bit of like a lightweight version of fantasy sports, for example. So they also, as part of this, DraftKings helped us create a fashion popularity pool, which we also put into the eligibility. And then this all led to a contest, and the incentivized users to participate with up to $20,000 in prizes, all courtesy of H&M, of course. So this was a huge success for them. The prediction pool had almost 37,000 total entries, which might not sound like a lot, but it actually was 10,000 more entries than any other pool running on DraftKings. H&M now holds the top spot for the most entries of any sponsored NBA contest through this year's playoffs. So this was a huge success. The brand saw it as a success. It was a great moment to be an early brand in this new media space. And yeah, and Futurecaster was really the thing that helped get them over the hump and convince them that even though we could manage their brand safety concerns, that this was a new area for them to that they should be investing in. So here is a second case study. This one is for Neutrogena Hydro Boost. And this is really about how Futurecaster can help give brands sort of a new license to be more creative and really unlock new possibilities by thinking a little bit further outside the box. So the Neutrogena team had reached out to us, basically saying they were getting crushed by the competition. They were, despite the fact that the product was seen as innovative, the Hydro Boost line was seen as innovative, consumers weren't really seeing that innovation in the marketing, and it was undermining a little bit the promise of the actual product itself. So they had historically Neutrogena had really been focused on sales as the only KPI that they were interested in, but we were able to convince them to broaden that scope a little bit, because when we pulled Futurecaster against their Hydro Boost audience, these were the three territories that really popped: gaming, live video, and social commerce. They had done social commerce, experimented with that in the past, but gaming and live video were both totally new to them. So we sort of looked across these. We're not just saying, let's only do one of these. Let's see if we can bundle these three into one activation. And that led to what we call the Skinfluencer campaign, which we worked with a gaming influencer network, which is called Adder. You might not think that gaming and beauty have a lot in common, but we worked with Adder to identify 7 female content creators in gaming and cosplay. We paired them with some skin health experts and then live streamed these education and wellness sessions on Twitch, which really helped resonate with their audiences in the places where they were already meeting their audience. So I'll just play this quick case study video for you, just so you can see some of the actual work that was live on Twitch.
How many of you guys in chat have a skincare routine? I'm gonna be honest, I just started one. In my chat, I'm saying they don't have a skincare routine. And honestly, if I can do it, I think anyone can. The thing about routines is it's not an overnight thing. However, with the Neutrogena products, I actually felt such a big difference the first time I used it all because it was so hydrating. Like I used that at night, and then the next morning I was like, oh my god, David, touch my face, touch my face. So
you can tell just from the video which one is the professional influencer broadcaster and which one is the skincare expert who's brought on as a guest.
I got you, Trey. I got you.
Okay, in the interest of time, I will keep going, but this was a huge success for Neutrogena. Total departure from anything they had done in the past. So they saw it as very risky, but the campaign delivered 26.7 million impressions, and the average viewer in the live stream watched for 37.5 minutes, which is obviously huge. If you compare that to something like a 30 or a 60-second spot, that was 37 times that at least. But it also was near 50% higher than the average Twitch user's daily watch time. So they were, even when compared to the average Twitch user, they were 50% more engaged, which is huge. So really amazing media metrics there. We also won, for this project, we won an award for the best brand integration into gaming and esports from Digiday. So we saw this as a huge success. Obviously, the Neutrogena team did as well. Futurecaster was really the tool that gave them the permission to activate in the space. And this was so successful that we're actually about to start going into year 2 of this campaign and making it even bigger and better and investing even more in the space of gaming influencers on Twitch with Neutrogena. So very quickly and briefly, the last pillar of that innovation on-ramp is business model innovation. And this is something that we do that is very bespoke. It's very custom for every client that we work with. Sort of on the upstream side of things, we publish every month a category disruption report that's looking at how the business fundamentals within a specific vertical are changing. I mentioned this earlier. If you go to our website at ipglab.com, you can see the articles that go with this, although the actual reports themselves are reserved specifically privately for clients. And then I don't have a case study because, as you might imagine, a lot of this work is incredibly custom and rather proprietary to the clients that we do. But just to give you an example of the kind of output that this work portrays, again, non-Nestlé brand, but the pet health company Elanco, which makes over-the-counter and prescription medication for animals. We worked with them last year to help them think through future-proofing pet care and all the changes that were happening in the market for pet health and wellness coming out of the pandemic, which, as you might imagine, was a huge sort of inflection point for consumers adopting new pets and lots more investment and spending in the space. This was a report that was almost 200 pages long and provided things like strategic recommendations, potential partnerships and M&A activity that they might consider, and where we really thought as a pet health company, they might take the business in the future based on the consumer trends that we were seeing and competitive trends that we were seeing in the market. So just to give you a quick overview, here's sort of the total listing of lab products on one slide in terms of how we think about and productize our offerings. And again, right now, we're mostly working with a brand like Nestlé on that media innovation space, and Futurecast really being the key to helping us organize our thinking and strategically activate in media innovation. And I think we're just hitting the 10-minute mark to the end of the session. So I think now is a great time to open it up to Q&A. I hope that was interesting, and I'd love to hang out for another 10 minutes and answer any questions you might have.
I was going to say, well done for time, Adam. Super great. All right, we'll jump right in. I think we've got some really great questions that I'm sure you would love to give your insight on. The first one is, what makes something innovative in the marketplace? I think you talked a little bit about why, like how we can be innovative. So people would love to hear what makes innovation innovative.
Yeah, I think it's really about understanding new technologies, new platforms, new media channels that consumers are engaging with. And we take a pretty broad look at that because we do include things that are more technology and less media, things like, at least right now, like the metaverse or Web3 and crypto. We obviously look at those because there's a lot of consumer interest around them. So we have to make sure we're tracking them. We really try to go where consumer interest and attention is focused. And then again, we have to filter that against the capabilities for brands and the abilities for brands to activate in the space and understand, how sophisticated that activation might be. But it's really just focusing on what consumers are doing is really the most important starting point. Agreed.
I think it's a good example that you gave in the 2 case studies, right? Although you might think that it might not be a good idea, but if you know your audience really well and you know your brand really well and you know who you're trying to reach, you're definitely going to be able to achieve that. Great. Yeah. So that ties into the next question. Why should big brands like Nestlé care about innovation in media and marketing?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to understand where consumers are moving their attention, because attention is a fixed resource. We only have so many hours in the day that we're going to be consuming any kind of media reachable by any brand in terms of advertising or even earned media. So it's important to understand where that attention is going because it's coming from someplace. So for example, a big shift that's happened over the past decade, if not longer, is the shift away from linear television, right? Just especially younger people are not watching linear cable or broadcast TV, and certainly not in the numbers that they used to, 10 years ago. So we need to find those people and reach those people on the platforms that are capturing their attention. And some of that has moved to platforms like TikTok, for example. Some of it has moved to gaming and metaverse platforms like Roblox. It's all about understanding where that attention is going. And technology and the internet specifically have really opened up the number of channels, right? 30 years ago, we wouldn't have been looking at a chart of new and emerging media channels that included 25 territories. Because of the internet, obviously, there could theoretically be a new one every day. And it's just about understanding which ones are really gaining traction and that we think are going to become more mainstream in the future.
Definitely. I think this is a good follow-up question again. I mean, from your experience working with IPG, what sort of challenges have you faced when you pitch the idea of innovation to your potential clients? Do you get pushback? Are they open?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants innovation, I think, at the end of the day. I think very few brands will ever tell you they don't want to be innovative. It's also, frankly, it's one of the most fun parts of our jobs, and fun parts of working in media is looking at those new channels and experimenting and learning about them. I think the biggest challenge is getting people comfortable, getting sort of assuaging their fears that they're not just going to be throwing money into a black hole, that just because this is a newer platform or a newer medium, that they're going to be getting something back for their investment. And again, that might be sales, it might be brand halo and reputation, it might just be PR. But I think that we need to get them over that hump and make them feel comfortable that their investment in the space is going to get them something back in return. And that's really where Futurecaster came in. It really was a data-driven way for us to prove to our brands that consumers, your specific consumers, not just consumers in general, are moving to these new platforms.
Okay. The next one is data and AI the only driving factor behind marketing innovation, or a blend of other methods as well? If so, what other methods do you consider before, integrating innovation?
Yeah, I mean, sure. So I kind of think there's two questions in there. One is data. Data is certainly important when we think about direct response marketing, which has evolved a lot from the earliest days. And things that are going to direct response is sort of what I would consider anything that immediately is convertible to a sale, to purchase, which obviously used to be one thing and now is evolving and coming to other platforms, like a lot of the social platforms adding commerce capabilities. That is certainly one thing that powers those more direct response focused campaigns and activations. Data is. But there also, I think, is a lot of room for creativity. I think that you have to know how to use the data that's available, but at some point you also have to take a little bit of a leap of faith into being creative and innovative. And we use the data to help us identify those emerging channels. But then once we identify that channel is someplace that our consumers are, we put the data aside and we brainstorm and think about all of the different ways you could activate. I think that sometimes there will be a second layer in terms of existing case studies within the space, but there's also a lot of room for creativity there. And in terms of AI, some of that data that powers that is powered by AI and machine learning. I think the most interesting thing that's happening with AI right now is what you see with DALL-E and the other projects coming out of OpenAI, and the other AI machine learning based image generators, where you can just type a sentence into a text prompt and get a series of images that are totally original generated from that sentence. I think those are super interesting, and I think eventually they're going to change marketing in terms of the creative, right? You'll have dynamic creative that isn't just choosing from a set that has been designed by a designer at a creative agency. You will actually have an AI-powered bot behind them who is generating the creative dynamically based on a lot of the data that is being exposed to it when you land on a page and see an ad. So that's something that I'm super interested in. But I don't think it's not the only factor. Obviously, data and AI are sort of providing one input, but you also have the channels and formats, right? Like if we look at what's happening with augmented reality, right now, that's not really connected to any data or AI pipeline. That's purely a format and a distribution point. And eventually those two might sync up. They probably will towards that dynamic creative point. But right now, I think data and AI is sort of happening in one stream in the background, but there also is a lot of experimentation in formats and channels that is maybe not mature enough to be linked up to the smarter backends, I guess.
Thank you, Adam. I think that is actually a fantastic close to this session. We're running out of time, so I can't
Yep.
take any more questions, but I'm sure a lot of people are dying to know. But once again, thank you so much. That has been super interesting to think about how we can be innovative with, our marketing campaigns. It's absolutely fascinating to see the case studies that you've shown us, and I'm sure that everybody shared the same. But without further ado, before I let you guys go, and we thank Adam for his time, do know that we have another session that's going to happen in a second. So do connect via the link that's going to be in the chat. I'm sure if you guys are curious about what Adam does, you can follow him on his LinkedIn or check out IPG's website on all the other things that he spoke about in this thing. As usual, if you are going to catch the next session, make sure you join us via the link. The next session will be by Antonia, Marcus Ma, and Ariella Noel, and they're talking about brands and culture and how Nescafe connected with Gen Z through gaming in China. So kind of related to what Adam was speaking about today. If you learned a lot of things today and you would love to share it on your social media, please tag us with the hashtag NestLevel. And then we hope that you enjoyed the next session. And thank you so much again for joining me and Adam in this one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mai. Thank you, everyone.